All right. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening. Goeienaand, mense, and shalom. Welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends. It's Sunday at 8 p.m. You know what that means. Your favorite fat boy, Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty, is back on your screens. Whether you're watching this simulcast on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, welcome to it. As always, a reminder to you, just hit that like button. Do it right now. Save them kids in Africa. Hit that like button and you'll help get this show out to a much, much wider audience. Welcome to it. I'm so excited tonight on Liberty and Friends. We are going to broach the issues that made the headlines in the last week. Maybe these issues are issues that made you angry, sad, happy. Maybe you laughed at some of the headlines. Who knows? But tonight, as always on Liberty and Friends, I'm not alone. I'm with the Friends panel. Those are the revolving door, are a veritable who's who panel of folks who will help me break down these headlines, providing that compelling analysis that you come to get here and nowhere else. With that being said, welcome to it. Once again, just a reminder, please hit that like button if you want to support the Big Daddy Liberty show. The show is wholly supported and funded by people like you. Just check the descriptor at the bottom of this video to see how you can do that. Welcome to it. Let me bring on this week's panel. As I said, guys, I foresee fireworks and fantastic analysis. Let me bring on the duo from the Man Patria podcast. These chaps, of course, come to you every Monday at, is it 7 p.m.? I'll have the host, Dumo, correct me. There he is, nodding his head. Dumo, good evening.
Hi, Sihle. How you doing? Always great to be on your show and looking forward to having a great discussion. And yes, the Man Patria podcast is at 7 o'clock every Monday. 7 p.m.
Excellent. There you heard it. The other half, of course, is Ukoketo Resane. There he is. Koketo, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Sihle. Good evening to everyone watching. Good evening to everyone who's watching during the day after Sunday. Yeah, let's cook with gas. There's a lot to get through.
Absolutely. Let me bring on someone who has done a lot. See what I did there for me this week with his organization, the Free Market Foundation, having honored me, believe it or not, of all people, with their Free Market Foundation award, and that was the Free Market Foundation's Martin van Staden. There he is. Martin, good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, congratulations on the award, Sihle. Well deserved.
Thank you, my brother. It was very, very awesome to have just been recognized by you guys. Again, FMF doing fantastic work. Please make sure you find them on their website and, of course, their YouTube channel, which is definitely growing. That is, of course, Upra Martin van Staden. Speaking about another Bra van May, Kanthan Pillay, all the way in, I don't know if you should mention, but just not in the country. Let me leave it at that. Kanthan, good evening.
I'm quite happy to tell people that I'm sitting across in Harare, Zimbabwe, as we speak.
Hey man, Operation Dudula might come through here. I'm mistaking you for something else. So let me just pass that. That's Ukanthan Pillay, of course, writer, columnist, media guru, someone who I'll be picking his brain. That's an offline chat that we are looking to have there. Kanthan, welcome to it. And I see Gabriel Krauser in my waiting lobby. He might be having a few technical issues. I'll let him communicate with me. He'll let me know once he is back on. Gabriel is with us tonight. Gabriel Krauser, of course, is from the Institute of Race Relations. He's the head honcho when it comes to campaigns in that part of the world. But I think he's having some connection issues. But we will get going and get straight into it, guys. Oh, my goodness. Let me begin, perhaps, on the international front with a rather scary development out in... I suppose a fellow is the word I'm looking for, Commonwealth country. I'm talking, of course, about Canada, led by a one Justin Trudeau. I want to play some clips, guys, because things have descended a little bit into chaos in that part of the world. And I want to begin here when it comes to this conversation. What am I referring to? Of course, the Freedom Convoy, that segment of Canadian society that actually said, you know what, to hell with these various mandates that are linked to the spicy cough, to hell with the lockdown, to hell effectively with politicians usurping for themselves a greater proportion of powers that they have never had before. And seemingly, if you listen to a one Justin Trudeau, an agenda that doesn't speak to what the voters of that country have looked for. I want us to remind ourselves, of course, before I play this clip, that Justin Trudeau's government is a minority government. He actually doesn't have a majority that is 50% plus one in that part of the world. So what have we seen? A response by the government, initially by politicians gaslighting and painting these protesters with those demands as being somehow a fringe group, even arguing that they are akin to terrorists. Listen to the Justice Minister, Justin Trudeau's Justice Minister, talking about the Canadian protesters who were outside the Ottawa Parliament.
Look, you've just compared people who may have donated to this to the same people who are funding maybe a terrorist. I just want to be clear here, sir. This is really important. A lot of folks says, look, I just don't like your vaccine mandates and I donated to this. Now it's illegal. Should I be worried that the bank can freeze my account? What's your answer to that?
Well, I think if you are a member of a pro-Trump movement who's donating hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to this kind of thing, then you ought to be worried.
Now, bear in mind, as I played that clip, and I must say fair use, shout out to CTV, which is all the way from Canada. Fair use, please. I must say that. Otherwise, this video will be demonetized. Here's a justice minister who is effectively painting a very divisive message about what are effectively fellow Canadians who are just protesting. And this comes off of the back already of his own prime minister, Justin Trudeau, gaslighting them, arguing that they are akin to Nazis even. Kanthan, I must begin with you. It is absolutely spectacular to watch how the Canadian state, led by Justin, supposedly liberals, giving themselves the sort of powers which are more authoritarian in nature.
We're fundamentally aware that it's the liberals who have always been the ones who have been able to invoke the power of the deep state and call it down upon the masses. And it's very rarely that you have a situation where more libertarian governments, shall we say, for want of a better word, ever resort to calling down the wrath of the state. The issue fundamentally here is the question of whether we are a country of laws or whether we are a country of the state being able to do whatever they want to, whenever they want to. And this is something that we should be looking at applying around the world. It doesn't really apply in the context of what's going down in Canada right now. Because fundamentally the divide right now around the world is who has the ability to control your money. If you look in terms of what's happening in the United States around the ability of various people to raise funds, everyone who gets demonetized on YouTube, for example, ticks that particular box. Everyone who ends up with their assets being forfeited to the state without a court order ends up ticking that particular box. And so you must actually understand that the situation that we have right now with the likes of Iqbal Survey in this country, who is being denied access to banking facilities simply because the people who are in power right now happen to not like what he is saying. It's exactly the same scenario that's going down in Canada right now, where because of the fact that you have a scenario where people are reaching into their pockets and donating money in order to support a cause. And frankly, my money, I've earned it. I have the right to donate it wherever I choose to. And that should be the rule of law, wherever you happen to be. But essentially, because of the fact that the state fundamentally has the ability to come in and take money out of your bank account or freeze your bank accounts or dictate at the point at which that you have given funds to a particular entity, that they declare that entity to be arbitrarily guilty of a crime without any rule of law being violated, by the way. It's entirely on the basis of the state stepping up and saying, we have the right to take your stuff away from you when we choose to take your stuff away from you. So remember that the question of the funding for these guys started off with GoFundMe. And very quickly, this rocketed to being one of the, in fact, it was the biggest fundraiser that GoFundMe had ever had in Canada. And they very quickly raised, I think,
Captain, your line broke for a moment there. They very quickly raised.
So they ended up, they raised close to 11 million Canadian. And what they said at the and at that time, GoFundMe then, based on instructions from the Trudeau government, said, actually, no, we are now going to take this money and we are going to give this money that you donated to this cause. We are going to give it to other institutions that we think are more appropriate. Just think about it. Okay, I've donated money to a particular cause. The state comes along and says, no good, we're going to steal your money. And it was only based on the threat of legal action. And the threat of legal wasn't in Canada. Legal action who suddenly said, we are now going to file charges against GoFundMe. At which point GoFundMe suddenly backed off and said, we are now going to return the money to the individuals who donated. Well, which they can do because they have access to credit card information. So then there was a Christian fundraising organization that stepped in. And then the money was then raised once again. And now suddenly you have a situation where arbitrarily the government is stepping in, declaring an emergency so that they can literally steal money from people who have contributed to funding this cause. So it's worrying.
And I must chime in here because, Martin, even as I come to you, there are fundamental issues here around the rule of law. I'm seeing Graham McTaggart effectively saying, hey, man, throw it to Martin because he'll unpack that element with he'll unpack that element with a bit more detail also, insofar as, here's a prime minister, Martin, who, even as premiers of provinces say there's no need for him to invoke the Emergencies Act, proceeds to invoke the Emergencies Act and almost gives that rhetoric, that tone that we, the citizenry around the world, because we're not Canadian citizens, but around the world, that tone of, no, just 2 weeks to achieve X, and then everything will be back to normal. And then proceeds, Martin, I want to add that one more element, via his finance minister and his deputy, to then argue, actually, no, maybe it isn't 2 weeks. Some of these powers we're going to integrate into current law and make them permanent law going forward. For example, funding the truckers is now part of an anti-terrorism legislation in that part of the world.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not only just a case that it's not necessary for him to invoke the Emergencies Act. More than that, this is the first time ever that the Emergencies Act has been invoked since it was enacted in 1988. And it's way out of bounds of what that act allows. It's about severe threats to the safety of Canadian citizens. So the way they're trying to get around this is exactly as you say, and as that Justice Minister said, they're now defining the truckers as terrorists. Now, I don't agree with this method of protest. I mean, we had a show a few months ago about truckers in South Africa blocking roads. I think there is a big problem with that method, but geez, to call it terrorism is really off the reservation. And it's that same old case of Martin Niemöller. We said first they came for the X, and then the X, and then the X, and eventually they come for me. I don't have to agree with the way the truckers are protesting to see that what the Canadian government is doing here, which is a very Chinese thing that the Canadian government is doing here, is hugely destructive for the very concept of law in Western civilization. It used to be the assumption that governments will not have the power to go to a private actor like a bank and just dictate to them, listen, freeze your client's funds. The bank is supposed to serve the citizen, the client. The state is not the bank's client, yet the state has now essentially conscripted private enterprise to be a proxy for its own conduct, which makes it much easier for libertarians like ourselves to, for instance, say, yeah, but it's the state doing it. They can just say, well, it's private companies doing it. I mean, I think the Canadian a spokesperson for the Canadian government, I think today, said something like that. No, it's a myth. It's a myth that we're freezing bank accounts. We're recommending to the banks. We're informing them that they have problematic clients, and then they make the final decision. Of course, that's not the case, but it's a total upending of the rule of law, and I think another thing is that's central to the rule of law is the way that it's arbitrarily being applied. So, like I said, this is the first time this act has been applied in 3 decades. Are we saying that in 3 decades, Canada has never had a situation that ever justified using intense state powers than a bunch of truckers saying that we don't want to be imposed upon? They're not going out of their way to violate anyone else's freedom. They're just saying, hey, just leave us alone. That's unacceptable to me, especially when Trudeau, for instance, is now a very big supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, which destroyed tens of millions, even probably hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property in the United States, and he's okay with that type of protest. So it's a huge hodgepodge of arbitrariness, but we in South Africa need to watch this very carefully, because only about a year or two ago, I was able to say, oh, well, South Africa isn't as free, but at least there's a free world out there, a free society which we can basically fall back on and say, the free world will keep setting the example. I feel a lot freer in South Africa right now than I think I would be in the West, the home of freedom. So we need to be very careful about what's going on here and really see to it that the Chinafication of the world doesn't continue quite as quickly as it is.
Absolutely. It's delicious irony, Martin. Part of it also being linked, of course, to how global organizations who are elected by nobody, global organizations are effectively filtering their influence, their policy direction, their will, if you will, onto these various governments around the world. Of course, I am referring to the World Economic Forum in this instance, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole for a moment, because there is another clip. Dumo, I do see you. Koketso, I do see you. And of course, there he is, adding him to the screen. Upra Gabriel Krauser, in a very familiar environment for me, broadcasting from his car. Gabriel, good evening.
How's it, Sihle? How's it, gentlemen? My humble apologies for breaking into from a bucky in the middle of the Free State. It's been a very exciting half an hour, having discovered that the signal that was working this morning is no longer working. But it's very good to be here.
Oh no, dude! Welcome to it. Let me just cut to, as I was just saying now, guys, I have lots of clips tonight, really, which will add context to this, just because there's a lot of meat and potatoes, really, to this issue. We've spoken and we've broken down how the politicians, ahead of the response of the state via this Emergencies Act, we're beginning to actually already gaslight the situation and paint these freedom protesters being akin to terrorists or Nazis or whatever the case may be. Pardon me. Just listen to, by the way, before I even get to this chap, there were certain individuals who took a principled stance, seeing where things were about to go, took a principled stance and said, you know what, I do not want to be a part of this. Chief of this, excuse the pun, is the chief of police of the Ottawa area. He was just like, no. I can see where this is going. I don't agree with it. Choops, I'm resigning. I'm done. The chap who I'm about to show you now is basically the interim or the acting chief of police, and clearly he's the exact opposite. He's quite happy to enforce the dictates of a state. Just listen to him talking about what he would do even if these protesters dispersed.
If the protesters at this point, retreat and go home, are they going to be getting sort of repercussions down the road? Or are you going to be sort of actively pursuing the people that you've been sort of documenting and filming who are still out there protesting? What are your plans after this, after the protest is over?
Thank you. It's a great question. And the simple answer is yes. If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely. This investigation will go on for months to come. It has many, many different streams, both from a federal financial level, from a provincial licensing level, from a criminal code level, from a municipal breach of court order, breach of court injunction level. It will be a complicated and time time-consuming investigation that will go on for a period of time. You have my commitment that that investigation will continue, and we will hold people accountable for taking our streets over.
You know, Dumo, even as I listen to this chap speak, I know you and I have had this conversation before in reminding people that even though as libertarians we talk a lot about the role of the state, in which, you know, one of them is to protect us, that is the state protecting citizens, protecting their life, liberty and property rights from domestic threats, i.e. having a police force that can obviously administer justice. We've always warned ukuthi amaphoyisa are still agents of the state, and many checks and balances are needed to contain even their power. You see it in that instance where this man, obviously drunk on the and gleeful with the power that he now has, saying, I'm going to come after these citizens. Even if you've dispersed, we're coming after you.
Right. And this is why I say power is the most dangerous drug. I think people will always try to rationalize using it. I mean, you see now with Trudeau, because now this protest undermines him, he will try to rationalize using the Emergencies Act to get things going for him. And I don't know if you saw Jacinda Ardern, same thing. There was a clip that was circulating on social media where she was justifying having these types of powers. And this is the problem now, is that now people don't see that they are becoming the evil ones, because now it's not like as if these guys are destroying property. And this is very interesting with the BLM protests. Property was destroyed heavily, you know, but guess what? People said, oh, it's peaceful but fiery. But now you got guys on a truck or in trucks, you know, hooting the whole time, or honking, as they would say. Now it's a massive issue, and now they are deemed a terrorist threat. And this is the problem with the state. They can deem anything as a threat. They can say, well, we don't like this, therefore we're going to go after them. And this is the problem with the Emergencies Act as well. My question is, does a state really need an Emergencies Act? Because it seems to me they can use it to silence dissidents. And on top of that, there's another problem. Now that they see the powers that they can get from the Emergencies Act, what's going to stop them from actually saying, okay, we are now ending this phase of the Emergency Act, in the sense that we're not going to be enacting it? There's nothing stopping them from doing that as well. This is going to go on forever, and it's going to be a very big problem. And I think at some point, more people in the police are going to see the problem, and they might resign as a result. So the clip that we saw here is just one person who hasn't seen the light yet, from what well, at least I hope he hasn't seen it yet. But when he sees it, he will go.
You know, Koketso, even as Utumo says this, I'm not as confident. I'm not as confident, because it seems as though we're seeing a repeat of history, Lana Dumo, Koketso, where to a large extent, the police officers, when you listen to some of the clips that they put up, will say things like, look, I was just following orders, man, you know. I know it doesn't make me feel nice that I'm doing this to fellow Canadians, blah, 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 hapati, hapata. And you're now seeing it in the sense of shame. Almost shame that they're feeling. Watch this clip, Koketso. This is the police in Ottawa who, you know, by law, are meant to have name tags, their rank, all sorts of information that identifies them clearly. And we're seeing a very dangerous trend now, especially during the spicy cough and its enforcement of lockdowns, where police officers around the world are concealing their faces. So not just a mask for the spicy cough reasons, but actually concealing their faces with balaclavas and removing name tags. Just watch this. This is the police in Ottawa as they were jackbooting themselves towards dispersing the protesters.
You're literally the last thing holding us from having our freedoms back. You are the last fucking thing that's blocking us from freedom. Stop hindering us, man. We want our freedoms. Once we give them up, that's it. We'll never get them back. It takes broken promises to get people into communism and a revolution to get them out. And I trust you, man. Trust me. We don't want to be on that side.
I'm getting hot dog.
Sure.
Again, you'll notice what I'm talking about, Koketso there. Those full balaclavas, helmets, of course, so that they conceal their faces, and they've actually removed their name badges.
I'm actually reminded a little bit of Star Wars here, in that, part of the symbolism of Star Wars, the bad guys being, whoever the stormtroopers are effectively serving. It's much of the same thing. You have policemen that look like stormtroopers, that is uniformed to look basically identical to each other. No way to identify each. They are literally just a number at that point in time. And the reason the symbolism of Star Wars was so effective and so powerful was because, the enemy is always a nameless, large, too big to fail, too big to challenge entity. And that's exactly what the police in this instance are doing. They are attachments of the state, of course, and they are, again, many in number, large, too big to fail, too big to challenge. And that's exactly what's being created there. I liked what the citizen was saying there, in that, once the freedom goes, then it's never coming back. And that's exactly what happens throughout history. You lose the freedom, and then it typically takes some form of revolution, some form of war, some form of civil war, some form of genocide in the worst case scenario, for people to get something as very basic as freedom. Now, I just want to rewind a bit to the first clip you played. I think, you said it was Trudeau's justice minister there. I couldn't help but actually notice this, but the minister in this case mentioned I think he mentioned things like, these are Trump values, that is, wanting to have freedom and exercise your rights has now been limited to be the exclusive domain of Trumpism, if there ever is such an ism. That really does show that they're really trying to almost gather the necessary points to extend themselves as an arm of the liberal movement over on the other side of the border in the US, of course. And again, we on the other side will then sit and say, right, there is the clear similarity now that people don't actually value the freedom, and they've been really looking for a boogeyman to put this all on. And in a context that is completely irrelevant, you have a justice minister in a different country who invokes the word Trump just so he can get the necessary political points with those that wish to take freedoms away. I find that actually quite immature. But back to the police, actually. I really do wonder what's then going to happen, because we've seen this in Africa of all places, where military dictatorships actually, anytime they try to offer some form of resistance on behalf of the state, many times it actually doesn't work, because which soldier, which policeman is going to do active bodily harm to their brother, their mother, their father, their cousin, etc.? I don't see that happening. And so this resistance I think it's likely to succeed over time, because when things do really go south and the feces hits the fan, I don't believe those same policemen are going to act against their loved ones when it comes down to that. But it remains to be seen.
Gabriel, as I bring it to you, Poti, it is a sobering reminder, and Ukokete rightly mentioned it. There is an importance, and I love that parallel of stormtroopers. There is an importance in the psychology of removing the name, removing identifiable features, masking, and of course, making them completely uniform, in the sense that the psychology of that mob mentality that it also creates within the police, where it's okay if one goes a step too far. No one will stop and say, Chief, don't do that. Remember, police protocol says XYZ. No, they become, in effect, a mob, a single blob, if you will, that acts without conscience, individual conscience, because responsibility is shirked onto the group or the gang, so to speak. And it makes it so much easier when it's all nameless individuals, masked, and there's no accountability. Gabriel, before you chime in, let me show you the consequences of that. The consequences of that, where these nameless individuals are even willing to quite literally trample not only on the rights of people, but also physically trample on Canadian citizens who are exercising what is a charter right of freedom of assembly and free speech. This is a lady, an old lady, was trampled by police horses. She happens to have some sort of disability, so she carries a walker, a mobility scooter, pardon me. Just watch the scene. I'm going to play two clips, so you can see the lady, and the other which is a bit more clear as to what happened.
This is what we're doing it for. So they all can have peace and love and happiness. Peace, love, happiness.
Amen. Amen.
Peace, love,
happiness. Peace.
You guys are breaking my heart. peace. We are at peace with protest. We are at peace with protest.
Hold the line!
Here comes the horses. Yeah, the horses are coming.
Hey, stand down! Oh my gosh! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Look what you did! Look what you did to her! Look what you did to her! Look what you did to her! You trampled on the lady who is inaccessible!
I mean, shocking images. That little lady you saw speaking about love and peace and all of that finds herself at the bottom of these burly police horses. I want to show you just a very quick clip. It's the same one, but just better quality. Bear with me, please.
Come on through. What is happening here? Wow, what is this lady doing? Trampling horses. Trampling. Stop it. Stop it. What? Oh my God. They just trampled this lady. They just trampled that lady. They just fully trampled that lady. They just fully trampled that lady. There's the lady. There's the lady that was trampled. Yeah, the lady got fully trampled by the horse. What the fuck is wrong with you? You just got crushed by a horse.
And you'll notice, Gabriel, that what I was just talking about, those same nameless cops then waving forward, not a sense of care even for the lady, just pushing forward and removing everybody. A very dangerous place to find yourself if you're in Justin Trudeau's Canada.
Yeah, that is perturbing, hey? It's not a good look for the Canadian police force. It doesn't seem like there's any way to justify that. And I must say, I as harsh as my immediate knee-jerk feelings are towards those police, I do know that I come from a place where I usually want to empathize with the police, because I think that it's too often the case that they are not respected in the jobs that they have to do. And sometimes there can be bad luck. Sometimes a thing you're trying and it goes wrong, but you know, if you think about it carefully, you can see why it was a good idea in the first place, and a bit of bad luck can come into it and someone can get hurt. And generally, I tolerate that. I think basic classical liberal values have some tolerance for that, because the police are in a very dangerous situation, and so there's already a very high risk, and so whatever you're trying to do is in a high risk environment. What makes that image different, what makes that footage, that situation, strike me as very different to a kind of heavy riot where, you know, police bump someone over, and, you know, and shops are being burnt down, and people are being shot at, and dump trucks are being set on fire, and, you know, whatever the case may be. In a situation where there's real violence, you can understand that the police might be trying the right thing, but it goes wrong. But that is just not a situation where there's any genuine... What credible threat of violence was there in that situation? And I don't just mean specifically in that environment, but if you look back over this series of protests, what credible reason do the police have to believe that if they don't trample like old people, old ladies, that you know, that the mob is going to break out and destroy buildings and kill people? Maybe there's something that I don't know about, but as far as I can tell, there is just no reason. There's just no reason, if reason is to come from a credible threat of violence, to clamp down, to trample people like that. But there is a reason, Sihle, if you look from another angle. And that angle is a sense of preciousness about the sort of COVID, the response to this pandemic, a kind of attitude of all or nothing, of complete ostracization for people who've had a slightly different opinion to whatever the official latest revision of history has been. There has been a very disturbing kind of authoritarianism that, to me, it kind of speaks to a phrase that I had tried to put out there for a few years before 2020, which was maternalism. In the history of the 20th century, a lot of people spoke about paternalism, this authoritarian impulse that's like we are going to go conquer other countries, other nations, and we're the best. And, fascism, generally speaking, was like a very father figure kind of thing. But there's also a dangerousness in the mother figure, a figure that wants to take care of you. And that's nice, but also wants to take care of you like you're a baby, even when you're an adult. Wants to, oh, you're sick. Oh, no, that's terrible. You got a boo-boo on your nose. Like, let me put you in bed. No, you can't go out of bed. You can't go hang out with your friends. You can't do anything that's risky. Just stay at home and be a goody two-shoes. Like, there is a way that sort of stereotype of caring actually becomes dangerous. And Americans obviously have their name for it, the nanny state. And it's kind of ironic how it comes full circle. Like when the nanny state comes to a position where it's putting men on horseback to trample an elderly lady who is literally just saying peace, happiness, and love. Like, let us do what we want so we can have peace, happiness, and love. It's poignant, Sihle, but it's very disturbing, and I hope that she's okay, and I hope that those police officers, when they took off their nameless, tagless uniforms, I hope they had a good long look in the mirror as individuals with an individual face to think about what are they enforcing actually.
That is the very interesting question. And on the issue of whether she's okay or not, well, there's two conflicting but pieces of information. The one initially came out, reported that she had actually died from that. And then later, others indicated that no, she hadn't, but had sustained some serious injuries on that. So I'm not sure as to what is confirmed in that particular front. But Gabriel, the point you're raising, and I'll come to you in a moment, Kanthan, the point you're raising is absolutely correct. The police officer, when he then does the debrief at the end of the day, what was he enforcing? What was the law, really, that was flouted here? There were videos floating around by, I forget his name, but he's sort of referred to broadly as the Canadian Chad. He's like this buff dude who was like one of the first to sort of say, oh, I know where this is going. Just say no is like his catch phrase. I just don't know his name. But he put a little vlog up where he basically said, even the arrests that you're seeing happen very publicly around the Ottawa Parliament. These people are being snatched up, put into paddy wagons, according to him. And, the police will drive, let's say, 15, 20 minutes out of town and just drop people off in the middle of nowhere and then come back to do the exact same thing. His assertion being because there is no law really being broken here, police don't have something to charge them with. Kanthan, let me come to you and then I must wrap up the section point.
Yeah, Sihle, my big thing is always to try and see what is the light at the end of the tunnel and what is the way out of this mess. Because I think we can all sit back and say, oh my goodness, this is terrible, and we don't know where the solutions are. There's a couple of things that are coming. Firstly, as you point out, there is a minority government in Canada. I do expect the Trudeau government to fall as a result of this. The first step in that process is the province of Alberta taking the central government to court, saying that they have no right to invoke an emergency in this particular case. But the far more interesting thing for me is that if you consider the issue that we have here right now, is that you have the population at large who are not the moneyed class. They essentially people who are that way. And so these people generally don't have that much money in their bank accounts. Now, what happened on Thursday was that all of the major banks in Canada actually went offline. And the reason why they went offline is because people were heading across to the bank to withdraw their money. It's known as a run on the bank. And it's a very powerful thing for the masses to be able to do. Because remember that the way in which banks actually operate is that they take your money, but then they end up lending that money to multiple people at the same time. So that in the event of everyone who actually has their money in the bank suddenly taking their money out of the bank is actually not able to pay you back. And in this scenario, because people were afraid that bank accounts are going to be frozen, the first thing they did was to say, let's get out there, let's take our money out of the bank. And again, the object lesson that comes out of this is that people actually have that real power at the end of the day. Just by the simple act of going to the bank and saying, I'm taking out all of my money and I'm going to be doing cash transactions only from this point onwards. It's incredibly powerful stuff, but also it's something that I encourage people to do on an ongoing basis, because remember that as long as you are dealing in the digital world, as long as you're doing that tap and go when you pitch up at Woolworths, they are able to subpoena your bank accounts. They know exactly where every bit of money has been spent. And the advantage of moving into cash transactions is that the deep state cannot actually track you. And yes, you forfeit the convenience that goes with it. But guys, take it that there are positive signs coming out of Canada. There are lessons that are now going to apply to the rest of the world. And I think that those are things that we need to take into account.
Absolutely, Campton. And I just see a comment there from Uset Apart saying, Campton, that's not true. The trackers didn't know that their bank accounts will be attacked. This was done in advance. I'm not sure what they're referring to in that sense, because I do remember, as you were saying, that it was announced that they would go after people's bank accounts in this regard. And I do take your point, Campton, that actually using the fractional reserve banking system against the banks is actually quite smart. Withdrawing your money, having the banks panic, and almost it's because it's a way of punishing those who Martin just said are choosing to take on the role of enforcer on behalf of the state, to say, if you're not going to stand for me, your customer, then I'll come after you in that particular regard. Guys, I must move us on because we spent quite a bit on this. Indeed, we're at the halfway mark of the show. Welcome to it. This is In Liberty and Friends. My name is Usihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty. Very, very packed house tonight, both in terms of the viewership and the friends here in the panel. Just remember, if you're watching this, please hit that like button. Just do it right now. Just take a moment, hit that like button, especially if you're liking this quality analysis, this compelling analysis that you really don't get anywhere else. Speaking about that, I'm talking to Utumo Denga and Ukoketo Resane. Those are the chaps from the Man Patria podcast. Make sure you find them, please, online and like and subscribe to their channel on YouTube. Martin from Starden in the corner there, as you can see, from the Free Market Foundation. Martin, shout out to you, my brother. And Gabriel Krause looking dazed. I don't know if his screen is frozen or what, but looking really surprised that he made it onto the stream. Gabriel Krause, there he is, unfrozen. Gabriel Krause from the Institute of Race Relations, and of course, Upra Campton Pillay, coming to us from across the Limpopo in Zimbabwe. Welcome to my friends panel for the evening. Guys, I must move us on this issue because we will prosecute it going forward on the show in various vlogs and the like. There's many lessons to be drawn from what is happening in Justin Trudeau's Canada. Guys, moving us on, one of the things that and maybe bring us back home, pardon me, one of the things we saw this week, which dominated the headlines, of course, is one leader of the red in tooth and claw, supposedly Pan-Africanist, communist economic freedom fighters, with Julius Malema taking the stand in what is effectively a hate speech case against him, brought by the civil society grouping AfriForum, pardon me. I raised this because, funny enough, one of the people who is involved in this case is a panelist tonight, so maybe let me begin there. Insofar as I think what I want us to limit our conversation is the response by Julius Malema to the cross-examination by Advocate Mark Oppenheimer, who was representing AfriForum, number one. Number two, the media silence as to the actual comments, the substantive comments made by Malema insofar as his view of white South Africans and what he intends, or what he argues he may in the future do, which is to call for the slaughter of white South Africans. You would think that a comment like that, made under oath in a court of law, would dominate every headline, front page, and instead we didn't see that. In fact, we saw fluffy pieces, including a nice video from EWN, the top 8 moments of Julius Malema. It was so lovely how they covered him. An almost deferential coverage, Gabriel, from the mainstream media.
Yeah, Sihle, I thought that the EWN top 8 moments of Julius Malema was particularly disturbing.
Yeah, boy.
It culminates in Malema telling the counsel that is cross-examining him that he's an extremely bad lawyer. This is a very personal remark which he'd made just before or after saying that the lawyer must be hallucinating, which he'd made just after saying that the lawyer must have a bad name because he's white. And then that lawyer tried to say, because he's white and that makes him a land thief. Oppenheimer tried to explain that his name has arrived in South Africa as a result of his grandparents fleeing the Holocaust. This was interrupted. But be that as it may, there was no sensitivity to respect for the court. I mean, one thing I will say, having testified in the same trial, is that I think it is a...
Oh, no. All right, we've lost Gabriel there temporarily. I will have him back on. But maybe as I do that, Dumo, I'll throw it to you. And then you, Martin. Let me play a clip, actually, as to what exactly I'm talking about here. How the exact words, if you will, that the local media in this country completely ignored, even though it was the mainstay of this man's testimony, which is effectively something he's repeated before in the past. I will play both of those instances where Julius Malema, the leader of the 3rd largest political party in South Africa, effectively says he doesn't preclude himself from one day in the future calling for the slaughter of white people. Here are those 2 comments he made on TRT World, fair use. And of course, I'll show you the comments as he made them in court.
I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm saying to you, we have not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future.
Yeah, but I mean, you'd understand somebody watching that, especially as it gets shared on Twitter, they freak out. It sounds like a genocidal call.
Cry babies. Cry babies.
I'm not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now.
I can't give you a guarantee of the future, especially when things are going the way they are.
Subtext.
Especially if things are going the way they are, there will be a revolution in this country, I can tell you now. There will be an unled revolution. An unled revolution is the highest form of anarchy.
That video clip, of course, courtesy of TRT World, fair use, as I must say, on this platform, so it doesn't get demonetized. Let me play that second instance. Bear in mind, these comments were made, I think, in 2016, back in 2016. So if there's one thing you can't blame him for, is being consistent on this. He flip-flops on everything else, but he has been consistent in seemingly his bloodlust for calling for the slaughter of white people. These are the comments he made in court after this very clip and another one were played to him.
Them in squalor, in poverty, in the townships. And for as long as there's no clear program to change the patterns of property ownership, we can all be guaranteed we are all going to be in serious trouble.
Now, the way the sentence is structured, you say, we are not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now. That means at some future date, we may call for the slaughter of white people. Is that correct?
Let's deal with that at that future date. I don't know what's going to happen.
So you're saying you are not ruling out that in the future you may very well call for the slaughter of white people?
It may not be me.
Could it be you?
It could be me, yes, but it may not be me.
Yeah, so it could be you. You could, at some future date, call for the slaughter of white people.
What will necessitate that?
You tell me.
I don't know. Why would I do that?
You've said you could do it in the future. Is that correct?
I can't guarantee that I can't do it or I won't do it.
So right now,
So I'm
if I
not
asked you
ruling
to
out that
pledge-
possibility.
If I asked you to pledge to say, I will never call for the slaughter of white people, would you make that pledge?
I will do it with ease.
Make that pledge.
Why would I do that?
I'm asking you to make that
I
pledge.
don't.
You
I
said
won't,
I will do it.
I,
with
I won't
ease.
do it.
Make the pledge.
I won't do it.
You won't do it.
Yes.
I understand.
Aibo. Wait, Dumo. This is someone speaking in a South African court of law, oblivious to the fact that saying something like that is actually, not only is it genocidal in nature, it's effectively, it's a tacit way of inciting that very violence. Of course, he's giving himself room to say, oh, I'm speaking hypothetically, but it's tacitly a way of saying, oh, I don't preclude myself, pardon me, from one day in the future calling for the slaughter of people purely based on their race.
Right, and that is very disturbing, and the mainstream media did not cover that. The only mainstream media outlet that I saw cover that was from an outlet called The South African. They covered that, they mentioned it. And this is the thing that I saw, even on Twitter as well, people were just going around and speaking about other things that Malema said, where he was grandstanding and everything like that. But this is really the core of what Malema's beliefs are. And I think this is something that should, if everyone actually took note and saw this, they should actually think hard and say, well, am I actually going to vote for a party where the leader says that he's not going to rule out calling for the slaughtering of white people, right, in the future? He's not going to rule that out. You are going to go and put your ex next to that party. And this is the thing about it. Malema has gone, like morally, that is just reprehensible. And I'm glad that, that Advocate Oppenheimer actually exposed that. Because the people that do care about this, they will take issue with it and say, hey, why did he say something like that? But the guys in the mainstream media who have been for many years given this guy a platform, and not say that they shouldn't, but they were very charitable towards him, and they never pushed him on that. And I have to give credit to TRT for at least asking that question, because that's a very problematic statement. How is it that like a few people in a country, and also I think the New York Post as well, when they hear comments like that, they speak about it and say, hey, that's a problem. But mainstream media in South Africa are not even mentioning this. They're talking about incidents when Malema said his mother was treated badly and stuff like that. And yes, we didn't want that to happen to his mom, but come on. I mean, he said something where it sounds genocidal. And now we hear talking about this and no one else is. And this is scary, because over time, this is going to be forgotten. And, Malema's going to make even more harsh statements, and people and the media is going to ignore it. And then when it does get worse, what are they going to say? And one last thing, on Twitter, one person, I won't mention their name, accused AfriForum of giving Malema a platform by taking him to court. And then he was caught out, and another person said, well, here's a video of you speaking to Malema in 2016 about his weight loss. You also did the same thing. And that's the problem. When it does get bad, the mainstream media is going to blame AfriForum, saying that you had no right to take him to court, because when you took him to court, this is when all the bad things started to happen. Meanwhile, they were doing this. They were giving Malema a platform for many, many years. Anyway, yeah, that's my rant.
No, but it's absolutely spot on. No, wait, do more. And I must come to Martin, then when I cook it, Canton, I'll come to you in a moment, my brother. Martin, we listened to, sorry guys, I'm just going to mute mics. There's a little bit of interference. Martin, we listened to this chap say this, and there's a collective gasp, maybe murmured in the court, a gasp as he said this. And I'm pretty sure as people gasped, they probably looked to the judge to see what he may say, as this man is effectively saying, I'm not precluding myself in the future from calling for the murder of South Africans. But this is where people don't understand the strategy of Mark Oppenheimer, that's the advocate who represented AfriForum. People think that just because Malema was verbose and his usual bluster, and he always had talking points to respond to everything, that somehow he was toe-to-toe with advocate Oppenheimer. Meanwhile, in reality, Advocate Oppenheimer was showing the world exactly who this man is and having him do the hard work.
No, absolutely. I mean, this narrative that AfriForum is giving Malema this platform, and therefore they're partly to blame for what's going on. I mean, it's ridiculous. The guy snaps his fingers, and the media lines up outside his office building. Like, he has a platform whenever he asks for a platform. AfriForum didn't do anything new here, and I have to give them a shout out here. I mean, you've now outlined their legal strategy. I think it's brilliant. I have many disagreements philosophically with AfriForum, but I have been a paying member of AfriForum for many years now. They are the only ones who do these types of things and do it properly. They are the only game in town when it comes to actually standing up to would-be tyrants. So anyone listening who isn't yet a member of AfriForum, please give them your support. But Sihle, what stood out to me really about Malema saying that, and it's actually quite distressing in a way. In that, I mean, the guy he's a national socialist. He's an authoritarian. He would be one of the worst dictators in world history if he ever got power. But this guy is sitting there, and I mean, he could just lie. He could have lied. He could have said, of course, Advocate Oppenheimer, I guarantee I will not call for the slaughtering of anyone, let alone a racial group. Of course, I guarantee it. He could have just done that and lied. But he's more concerned about appearing honest to his supporters and not perjuring himself in front of the court. He's more concerned about that than appearing to be a genocidal maniac. I mean, when you think about that for just a second, it is absurd. He's essentially saying perjury is worse than genocide. It's insane. It is absolutely insane that things like this happen in South African society. We are a relatively well-developed society with relatively strong democratic institutions, with all these watchdogs and very good civil society, but still we have this phenomenon where an individual like Julius Malema could make it into mainstream politics. It's bewildering, really, that this guy is where he is, and that essentially before this last election he went from power to power. The party doubled its support in 2 consecutive elections. We as South Africans have to ask ourselves, geez, how is this even possible? And I mean, AfriForum as well should get credit for this. They have clarified in the past, and I think they continue to do so, that they're not saying there is a white genocide happening in South Africa. There are a few fringe groups who say that there is an active white genocide happening, and the world must take notice. AfriForum doesn't believe that. I didn't believe that. But the fact of the matter is that is exactly what Julius Malema just said without equivocation. He just said it. It's crystal clarity. There is no subtext or anything like that. He said, "Hey, I'm keeping my options open. Maybe one day I want to commit genocide. That'll be cool too." He essentially said that. So it's on the radar now. It's official EFF type policy at this stage, and it's something we need to be hugely concerned about. Genocide doesn't fall out of the sky. I don't think South Africa will ever get there, but I guess in this I'm an optimist. But even though we will never get there, we need to nip anything like that in the bud as soon as it rears its ugly head. I mean, this is very, very disturbing. So South Africans really need to ask themselves, how are we still empowering this guy? The media needs to ask themselves, how are we still empowering this guy? Because even if he wants to kill white people, he's going to kill all the journalists first. He's not going to commit a genocide with journalists being alive. So just let's reorientate ourselves. Let's think clearly. Let's think lucidly and soberly, and ask ourselves and tell ourselves this guy cannot be near power. Not even the little bit of power we've already granted him. Take notes, Herman Mashaba.
Kanthan, this is where it gets interesting for me, because for me, insofar as the silence or the pretending as though he didn't say this by journalists, it begs the question of these double standards and the hypocrisy. Kanthan, can you imagine for a moment if the leader of the Freedom Front Plus in this country, and I only use them because they're often maligned in the media as being, representing only whites and a fringe white grouping, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just using them just for the sake of the example. Can you imagine for a moment they had, let's say, Dr. Groenewald who I have great respect for, by the way. But let's say he was in the dock, and the attorney for the EFF, pardon me, the advocate for the EFF, asked Dr. Groenewald that same question, and Dr. Groenewald said, "You know what? I don't know what will happen in the future, hypothetically, but I don't know. I may very well call for the slaughter of blacks in this country." Can you imagine, Kanthan, what would happen in this country, especially, let's begin in the mainstream, the corporate media in particular, and of course the outpour of outrage that is in this country? Why is it, Kanthan, that on the one side the corporate media is able to identify a problem and rightfully, in analysis, call it out as being a problem, but when it comes to their darlings such as Malema or Ramaphosa, no, we put on the blinkers when it comes for them? How do we trust the corporate media that does something like that, Kanthan? Oh Lord, I hope we haven't lost Kanthan.
The media is the problem. It's not that the corporate media has double standards. I just want to refresh your memories and to go back a couple of years where we had Adrian Basson as in the editor-in-chief of News 24. And Adrian said at the time, we want.
Kanthan, your line is really bad. You left us at, he said at the time. Okay. Kanthan, your connection is really bad. I'm just going to remove you for a moment and just ask that you log out and come back in. Maybe, okay, so let me throw that same question to you. Then, GC, I'll come to you, my brother, in a moment. You know, there is that double standard in this country of black leftists can do no wrong. That is effectively what we're being told by the corporate media. And bear in mind, in us being told that, they will then even equally try and suggest, the black leftists in particular, that they represent the voice of all black people. But I can assure you, Koketso, if yes, I made this point in a previous vlog this week. So if I went around singing, maybe holding rallies, and we South Africans went around singing, shoot the politician, kill the party political leader, they would quickly understand why singing Dubuli Bunu or shoot the farmer is so fundamentally problematic in a country with our sort of violence levels, including violence at times that is targeted at some minorities in this country. But because, you know, double standards apply to these types, nothing gets said.
Yeah, nothing gets said. And like, okay, I need to get this off my chest. So let me ask for permission. Okay, so here's the thing though, right? Firstly, you're right in that if any one of us actually went around and asked and called for any form of violent act against a very specific group of people, then we'd be dragged to court and this would make headline news all over the world. But somehow Malema is given the kid treatment, or he's given the kid glove treatment for reasons you and I can go on about. But besides that, right, I think the entire cross-examination, Malema basically treated it not too different from a press conference. That is pandering to a group of journalists so that they can fight amongst each other who can come up with the best headline article for tomorrow's newspaper. That's really what the cross-examination felt like for me. Very not too far from a press conference, unfortunately, but again, this is debatable, I guess. On the man himself, that is Julius Malema. So I believe this is probably the strategy of AfriForum's counsel here, but effectively, after much time spent on the stand, Malema failed to basically outline that when he specifically, and well, not just him, but when his group specifically sings "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," he has failed to outline that they don't actually mean it literally. He has failed to then come across and say that he would never not call for basically a genocide against a particular group of people. And by doing that, he then, I believe, can't guarantee that when they sing the song, they actually don't literally refer to it in literary terms. That is, they are calling for violence. I think he's failed to do that. But I guess we'll hear when closing arguments do come about. But there's another interesting thing here, which I see no one has actually covered this. Malema on the stand literally does not mention that they are, as a political party, the Economic Freedom Fronters, they are empowered to actually, through parliament, put together some laws that can actually address a lot of their grievances. Yes, the land one is a big one, but particularly when you talk of why do they sing the song and they mention their grievances, things such as maybe past injustices having not been addressed, maybe the TRC didn't do its job. There's no mention by Malema and the EFF that they are actually going to take this back to parliament and look to make some legislative changes, particularly to address these grievances. Therefore, you've got a sitting member of parliament who's basically saying that let's bypass the parliamentary process, let's bypass the institution that I effectively sit on and call for quote unquote an unled unrest. That's a very dangerous thing to say, in that he does a good job of actually separating himself from whatever unrest or anarchy might ensue because of his comments. But at the same time, he has failed to mount a defense by actually outlining that he wouldn't as a means of singing the song, be calling for such in the first place. And then on top of that, there's also this thing that let's not forget that genocide is a crime, right? Therefore, if you refuse to basically call out, or if you refuse to outline that you wouldn't be a proponent of genocide, aren't you in effect saying that you condone criminal behavior that could result as something that happens after you actually incite the crowd to singing a song? It's a very thin line, I guess, but effectively Malema has refused to rule it out, and that to me says a lot about the man. As for the EFF as an organization, however, I think one thing has to be said, that they do rely on this hate, particularly race-based hate. Yeah, I know it's a tongue twister. They rely on the race-based hate for them to actually remain relevant. There's no talk from the EFF about how to make the lives of ordinary South Africans better. In fact, they even fail at this so much that even something like COSATU does a better job of maybe outlining a way forward for the person who's on the street. All we ever hear about from the EFF is race-based hate, coupled together quite nicely with something like taking back the land, of course, with the state being the custodian of land. But Malema, as the man, has refused to actually outline that he would not call for the killing of a particular group of people. And by refusing to do that, I believe he has actually failed to outline his case that, first and foremost, the song is not an incitement of violence. And secondly, of course, that, when he does sing it with that very intention in the beginning. But I guess we'll wait for closing arguments to see what actually happens. I'm quite disappointed by society's response as well, in that they are glorifying Malema for telling his life story effectively a couple of times, and also articulating his hate for other people in a way that is palatable to much of the society. This is not something that we should actually be proud of. You don't hear of, for example, Holocaust survivors detailing the scorn that they have for a regime that effectively changed their lives for the worse, even if it's not them, but their parents. You don't hear of that. You don't hear of Colombians going ahead and detailing about how Pol Pot has actually ruined their life. You don't even hear people who come from terrible regimes, right, actually calling for the hate of an entire people, be it a political class or a race, etc. People who defect from Venezuela and North Korea, etc., they are able to succinctly limit their scorn to the people responsible and not a race or an entire class of people at large. Unfortunately, this is a mistake that those in the French Revolution made, in that in this tyranny of the majority, they actually lost their way. And Malema is effectively calling for the same thing. But we know that history often repeats itself. And in the event that it does, Malema is then saying that it may not have been me who called for it, but at the same time, not condoning the actions that would result potentially as a result of his actions in singing the song that if it wasn't for him, me and you probably wouldn't even know that song. I was born in 1991. I have no personal connection to such a song in the first place. It was probably sung long before my time. So the fact that him singing the song and making it mainstream means that it's actually on him. he's reintroduced into the lexicon the kind of hate that people are actually depending on and basically using that as a scapegoat for why they are in the situation that they are today. There's no talk of perhaps maybe changing things at a legislative level through parliament, of course. What he's effectively saying is let's bypass the law and let's bypass the parliamentary process and act on our own whims, and we justify this because of things that have happened in the past, whether you are an actual victim or whether you happen to be the son of someone who may have actually suffered. And that's that.
And again, lots of very nested features in your response there, which I want to throw to Kempton. Kempton, I'm going to ask you to please be brief because I want to bring in Gabriel. But even as I say that, Kempton, there's a point Koketo made, which I want you to eviscerate for me, please. This notion, therefore, that because Malema will come onto a stand like that and say, oh, I as a black person suffered this and suffered that, my family went through this, because I'm a victim in that sense, when I then do transition and become someone who argues that I'm willing to kill other people of another race, I do so because I'm a victim and I represent the view of black people, black leftist Kempton, and this thing of arguing they represent black people?
I'm going to express something very unpopular at this point, and that is that I think that we are giving far too much. We are giving far too much attention to this guy, and it is distracting us from the prime villain in this particular case, who is our President Cyril Ramaphosa and his government. And the threat in terms of the country right now is not the fact that Malema is able to get away with this sort of thing, precisely because of the fact that the ANC-led government does not do anything in terms of enforcing the rule of law. If they were actually doing so, we would not have a situation where Julius Malema was able to get away with this type of stuff. Now, understand the situation he's got here right now. He's playing the media, and he's playing the media because at the point at which we turn around and say, how dare you, he's going to turn around and say, well, I never would have said it in public, but I cannot lie under oath, and I was basically forced into saying something in public that I would otherwise never say. And guess what? He will absolutely be right. Remember that it is the media that is basically giving oxygen to this fire. I'm again going to quote those words of Adrian Basson. He said, we wanted someone to embarrass Zuma for everything he's done. Malema comfortably one country, he willingly and knowingly parked Malema's own sins in the past. So it's really that simple. It is the media that is giving oxygen to this guy. Going to be able to grow the support base. So
absolutely,
let's
Kempton, we missed
oxygen.
No, I was just saying we missed some of that, but I think we got the overall gist. Sorry, your line broke as you're making that important point around what Adrian Basson said. But I mean, just look at the comments coming through from Graham McTaggart saying exactly that. Kempton is on point as usual. Juju is the circus clown keeping your eyes on the hand, eyes of the hand, pardon me, in your back pockets. Gabriel, I must come to you, Buti, because you quite literally and physically were in that very same dock that Malema sat in. But I want to introduce a last concept, please, here, guys, in this regard, insofar as what we saw in this court. I've got a clip here. So on the one hand, Gabriel Krause was the expert witness on behalf of AfriForum's and Advocate Oppenheimer. But the EFF also had their own little so-called expert witness in their case. But she seemed to squirm when she was put under a little bit of pressure by Advocate Oppenheimer. Watch this.
Simultaneously, one can say, I'm also calling for a particular race to be exterminated. One can do both of those things with the same speech. Is that correct?
Well, this is pure hypothesis.
Yes.
And I'm not prepared to go there because it's outside the realm of what I've discussed.
Professor Ghana, as an academic, I would think that you are perfectly capable of entertaining hypotheticals. Now, I'm asking a simple hypothetical question, which is it possible, we can divorce ourselves from a particular song, is it possible to utter words or sing a song that simultaneously call for land reform on the one hand and also call for the extermination of a race?
My Lord, I would say the question that Mr. Oppenheimer is asking is outside the domain of my expertise as an academic. And I would say that my interest is in Mr. Malema's political use of song within the long tradition of song in the South African public and political domain. And that is what I'm interested in as an academic, and that is what I have done.
Professor Gunner, is it your case, is it your testimony that you are incapable of answering the question? That you're incapable of understanding the hypothetical I'm putting to you?
My Lord, I think that Mr. Oppenheimer is trying to come to a conclusion that really I'm not prepared to follow him into.
Now, Professor Gunner, that's the difficulty. In other words, it seems that you can see down the track. You know what the answer is. And now you are playing dumb. You're saying, I can't answer this question because you know where it's going to lead. That's incredibly evasive as a witness, especially one who's purported to be here independently, who will not be told what to say.
Of course, the comment section, Gabriel, going after this lady. But again, Gabriel, two elements I want you to unpack very quickly, because you were also there as an expert witness. The importance of actual credible data being put forward when you're under oath, number one, especially because that data will be cross-examined. Number two, linked to that, the left, Gabriel, clearly are caught in an echo chamber where they sprout this nonsense to themselves, never challenged, and when she was challenged in court, broke apart.
Yeah, let me just say, to plead for myself, that there was a clip going the rounds on Twitter where I seem to have been cornered by Advocate Kasiboti in a similar regard. He put it to me that I had described something as incredible. And then I said, no, I don't think I said that. And he said, no, you said that. Are you taking your testimony back? And then I was sort of caught like going, and then the Twitter thing cuts and then they say, oh, they really got him. But it turns out if you check the transcript that I never said that, and he put to me something which was not true. I'm just saying that if you want further context, if you worry that Advocate Oppenheimer was being unfair to Professor Gunner, I strongly encourage that you check the full tape. In my opinion, you will find that he was being perfectly fair. This is just to say that I think more information is always good. Don't be afraid to check deeper. I think that there's something really, really very serious and also quite sinister at play here, right? So the argument, the essential defense from Malema's side, and I confronted this today with the professor and another advocate on Newsroom Africa, the essential defense for Malema is the song Kill the Boer, Shoot to Kill, Kill the Farmer. It actually means we want land reform and justice. Now, part of what's disturbing about that is that Malema said a farmer, when he says farmer, he sees a white face, but that it means a system. Now, I think part of what's disturbing is that even if you do have a systems analysis, which is something I would disagree with, if you've got a Marxist systems analysis that the reason people are poor is because other people are rich, rather than that the reason so many people are poor is because we've got so many people with guns sort of stopping business from going ahead. If you've got the wrong systems analysis, at least we can have a political discussion. But it stops becoming a political discussion if you explicitly say, here's how I'm going to solve the problem. I'm going to put a face on the system. And when I say face, I don't even mean an individual face. I don't mean Winston Churchill or Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin or Mussolini, not a leader's face, not an individual's face. I'm going to put a race. Really, when he says face, he means race. He doesn't mean some individual. He means a race. He said so himself. He said, the face that I see when I say the word farmer is the face of white people. There's no such thing, Sihle. Let me tell you that you can look at me right now, and if you like, you can look at Martin van Staden, and we have different faces. There is no such thing as a face of white people. It is just a race. And that is, he puts a race to a system. So his systems analysis is ultimately that white people are guilty. this is only going to lead one way. It is fascism. It's the beginnings. It's the first principle of fascism. Now, I want to say quickly, to go back to an earlier point. Okay, so just to wrap this side of it up. So the good professor comes up there to say, no, he means justice and love and harmony or whatever. No, she's land reform and justice. When he says kill the Boer, kill the farmer, what he really means is land and justice. And what you've missed, and what you will see if you look further into the tape, as I encourage, is that before that, Advocate Oppenheimer had asked her, do you think that all songs have many meanings, or all utterances can have many meanings? She said yes. Oh, in this case, do you think it only has one meaning, land and justice? Yes, in this case, it only means land and justice. Other songs, other things have many meanings. In this case, only one thing. That's ridiculous. The deeper point, to go back to Malema's promises, he promised he'd be president. He promised that he would deliver what the people need. He promised that he would never change the cardinal pillars of the EFF's policies. He had promised that he would never turn his back on expropriation without compensation. He promised that Ernst Rutz would never be allowed into the EFF, which I thought was a fantastic promise. But then he couldn't promise not to call for everyone to be murdered on the basis of their race. It is a telling thing, but it went further. It went further, and this is the second part of what I had to discuss today, and what I think made the second substance of his case. And that is that if you ask Malema, and he was asked, does it bring any feeling to you to be confronted by two women, a mother and daughter, who were murdered, broken beer bottles stabbed to their vaginas, to the point where when the police arrived, they couldn't figure out if they'd been raped or not because mincemeat had been made of their genitals. The daughter's breast cut off, and the blood from those wounds used to write the words "kill the Boer" on the wall. Does that do anything to you to consider maybe, just to consider maybe, not singing "Kill the Boer" because it might inspire such violence? When you confront a man who has come to the stand before you to say that he was shot and he saw his wife be killed by farm murder, in a farm attack, and that the motive that he understood them to have was to drive him and his family off of that farm so that some kind of land reform program could go through. When you hear that, does it make you think twice, Mr. Malema? This is the kind of question he was asked to him. And his answer was very simple. It doesn't make him think twice. His answer was very disturbing. He was asked, when people are torturing those women to death, do you think they have power over those women? He said, no, they don't have power over those women. Or if they do or they don't, you can only answer that by first understanding, are they black or white? Because black people can't have power. Why can't black people have power, Mr. Malema? Because black people are poor. But what about Patrice Motsepe, Mr. Malema? He said, well, Patrice Motsepe is not a billionaire. It's a lie that he's a billionaire. What about Cyril Ramaphosa? Isn't he very rich? No, it's a lie that he's very rich. The number of things that Julius Malema said under oath that are demonstrably untrue is amazing, actually. But the heartlessness is only a surprise to people like Basson, Richard Poplak, those who saw expropriation without compensation, saw the EWC, saw the EFF come forward, and they thought this is a sexy new young leftist thing. And regardless of the implications, we'll punt it until it starts to stink. And it's very unfortunate that ever happened. Some people have turned their back, those that I've mentioned. More will come. And I'll just finish with a very small curiosity. You know, this thing about AfriForum giving them too much rope. It's interesting to me to have seen Mr. Malema say how heartless he is to another human being on the basis of their skin color. If it's a black person who suffers, then he feels their pain. If it's a white person, it's just criminality. But then he was asked a very simple question, Sihle, after he had said, umlungu, or in Venda and Sepedi, like the word for white person is a rich person, so no black people are rich, and so on and so forth. He said, there's no rich black people because this is his Marxist view, his Marx race nationalist intersection view. Then they said to him, Mr. Malema, you are being asked to apologize and pay a 500,000 Rand donation to some organization that promotes non-racialism. I wish they would donate it to the BDL show.
That would be very good. Or the Free Market Foundation.
Oh, that would be very nice.
I will write an open letter to them. But anyway, he's been asked for that. Simple question, Sihle. Simple question. Mr. Malema, since you have the subtext, since you have said no black people have any money, that is why they are powerless. That is why they are always victims. That is why no black person can ever say a thing to be criticized, a thing that can be dangerous, because there's no power. And because there's no money. Mr. Malema, could you afford to pay a 500,000 Rand fine? Could your party afford to pay a 500,000 Rand fine? Because Mr. Ndlozi, Dr. Ndlozi, afford to pay a 500,000 Rand fine? He said no, because we've got no money. And if you want us to pay a fine, first, white people must pay all black people $5 trillion. So it's amazing. But also, and this is quite serious, I think it's perjury. I think it may be perjury. I think it's worth investigating. Is it perjury? And this is a serious matter, because the advocate said, we have asked you for this. You are under oath here. And if you say you can't afford, maybe we can find the number you can afford. Maybe you can disclose to us what it is you can afford. If you can afford 250,000, for example, I'm putting words now to fill in the blanks. But this was the context, right? In that context, for someone under oath to say he's got no money to afford 500,000 Rand, his party's got no money to afford 500,000 Rand, it's worth considering, was it perjury, especially since they, on a technicality, try to go after Ernst Roots on perjury or on contempt of court, which is jail order. I think that's interesting because it exposes, beyond just the perjury point, it exposes the fundamental lie. Malema's fundamental lie is that a black person can never have power. It's humiliating. It's basically racist. It's sick. And that a black person can never have money, which is just deranged. But if you can give someone those two lies, if you can turn your back when someone says that, then you can let fascism nicely in through the door.
Gabriel, Yazi, the point you're raising is so important, because again, it's also fundamentally how the left operates, generally speaking, especially the left that have also appropriated racialism to their brand of, or their ideology, pardon me. It's this notion that an almost soft bigotry of low expectations, and black people can't be something, as the oppressor used to say they can't be something, but we said only because we need to be put in positions of power in order to give them that something, but also not really give it to them because we need to control it. For example, on land. Give the blacks the land, they'll say. Excuse me, I'm using their own expression here. But also don't give it to them. Rather put it into the hands of the state that will be running, because only we can run. We can administer the affairs of black people. Sounds a little familiar to a certain Bantu office or Native Affairs office that used to exist in this country under apartheid. But guys, I must say this. We have run out of time. Usually at this point, if things are cooking with grease, I usually ask for another 15 minutes from everybody. So maybe if I can just get like a little thumbs up from the panel, if I can get those 15 minutes. Because if I can, I'm going to move us to our last issue, guys, which is also critically important, really, the crime stats in this country this week. Oh, my goodness. The third quarter crime stats, once again, an uptick in the sort of crimes that we really fear in this country. Murder, contact crimes, for example. Allow me, please, just to quickly read just a few snippets, and then I'll come to you in the panel. Let me just quickly add this little screen here. This is, of course, from, who are these people? Give me a second as I go to my own notes. This is Business Tech, pardon me. The crimes that are getting worse in South Africa. Very quickly here, SAPS presented effectively what are the third quarter of the 2021-22 financial year. That's from October to December 2021. The total crimes over this period declined by 3.3%. You would think this is something worth celebrating, but then let's go into some of the details. However, contact crimes, violent crimes like murder and attempted murder are up. And these are the more realistic crime stats, because where there's a murder, there is a body, so to speak. South Africa recorded 6,859 murders in the 3-month period, up from 6,279 the year before. That's an increase of nearly 10%, guys. Attempted murders were up nearly 4%. with the SAPS tracking about 5,600 plus cases. Contact crimes and other crimes were up both in the quarter, with a notable increase, here's the kicker, in carjackings, near 15% nearly, and commercial crimes in particular. And of course, if you want to see the rest of this article, please, you can find it on Business Tech. Shout out to Business Tech for a nice, concise article in this regard. I wanted to go to Kanthan, but I see I've lost him. But Dumo, or rather Martin, and then Dumo. Martin, let me come to you. You know, we've been talking about this on the show, that really the crime situation in this country and the stats are never going to improve so long as we have a gaggle of politicians who, number one, erode the rule of law, corrupt the institutions of law enforcement, and three, actually schmooze up and buddy themselves with the criminals themselves.
Yeah, look, I always come back to this point. South Africa is one of the few violent crime capitals of the world. The most crime-rich place in the United States, for instance, would have a hard time measuring up to even places we consider relatively safe in South Africa, and that's a huge indictment. Now, I'm no criminologist, I'm no expert in the field, but my feeling is that the only way, the exclusive only way to reverse this trend is to empower individuals in South Africa to protect themselves. The price of crime in South Africa is extremely cheap, and it's gonna remain extremely cheap. That means most criminals know, even if they get arrested, the prosecution probably won't have an appetite to follow the crime through. They know the evidence will be tampered with by the police if they pay a small bribe. The cost of crime for criminals is way too low. That needs to go up hugely. And I think the most effective way, really, of doing that, as Gideon Joubert, one of your other very regular guests, always says, is every responsible South African who is willing to learn and be responsible should get a firearm and should be ready and able to protect themselves against violent crime in South Africa. That is the way you make the cost of crime in South Africa far higher than it currently is. Make it a gamble. For every guy who thinks he's going to rape someone tonight or he's going to kill someone tonight, make it a gamble. There needs to be a big chance in his mind that he's going to end up dead. That is how you incentivize crime to end. Now, I get the sentiment of many good, well-meaning politicians and intellectuals. We need to capacitate the police force. We need more visible policing and so on. I can see the logic behind that. I don't think that's where the answer lies. Those are long-term institutional things that you can do in a relatively stable and prosperous society. I don't think South Africa has the capacity for that. And I saw Chris's comment there. I'm not saying the United States is unsafe. That's precisely my point. Even in the most crime-ridden places in the United States, I think of places like Detroit, probably Chicago, that's going to have a hard time measuring up to a suburb of Cape Town, Athlone or something. So that's my point. It's South Africa really stands out. It stands out when it comes to random crime. I know in many of these South American countries with higher murder rates, that's usually gang-related crime. In South Africa, it's random. You're walking the street and you get stabbed for virtually nothing. So I would go out on a limb here and say that really we are, for an ordinary guy just minding his own business, this is really probably the most dangerous place to be in the world. And again, the only way to solve that problem, get everyone willing to learn, everyone who has a responsible head on their shoulders, get a firearm in their hands and allow them to use that to protect themselves, their family, their community, and their property. And don't force them to wait around for Bheki Cele to come riding in on a white horse, because he's never coming, I can promise you that.
Yes, Dumo. I must come to you, then Koketso, and then Kanthan. Guys, let's crunch the numbers here for a moment, because you're going to have the likes of that asshat of a minister appear before us and say, no, I've got it under control. I just need to do 1, 2, 3 things, and then it's all good. maybe even just fix my head a little bit and it'll solve the crime. Meanwhile, guys, reality strikes. For those of us who don't have bodyguards who walk with us 24/7, 74 South Africans a day, guys, are being murdered in this country. 74 fellow South Africans are being murdered daily. You and I live with that reality when we leave our gates. Fudge it. You don't even have to leave your gates. These criminals, brazen as they are entering our own private property to do this sort of thing. Dumo, it simply can't continue.
No, it can't continue at all. The reality is that Bheki Cele is not interested in reducing crime. He's just there as a spokesperson whenever some bad crime occurs. He's just there for a press conference and then just to ease people, and then he's gone. And if he was interested in actually trying to solve crime, you would see probably, I'm not a big fan of government spending, but you'd see more spending on the police, trying to train them. There's nothing about professionalizing the police service. There's this one saying that goes that people just join the police because they can't get any other job. And that's the reality. So even the police job is not looked at in the greatest of lights. So I think this is something that needs to change. People have said we need to federalize it. That could be the case as well. If you look at in our situation, we have one central government controlling the whole police in South Africa, which is not sustainable. The government can't control the whole police force from Pretoria. And then you go to places like, let's say, Bathurst in the Eastern Cape, where I heard that some of the police vehicles are not working. And it's not even that one, but others. That type of management, it just requires more people on the ground that are closer to it to have more control. So I think, in my opinion, Bheki Cele is not doing anything to make this thing better. And now we're stuck. And that's why I agree with Martin. We have to arm ourselves. We have to protect ourselves, especially women, because, women tend to be the targets of especially other contact crimes and so forth. They tend to be easier targets, and they also need to be empowered as well through the use, or let's say learning to use a firearm.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to play a clip here because it adds context to what I'm talking about on this issue, insofar as me really pointing out we have a problem in this country of violence, and in particular a murderous criminal I don't even know what word to use to fill in here. Something as what should be peaceful and relatively innocuous as a workers' strike in this country turns murderous. Please watch this clip this week, and I must stress this, guys. Viewer discretion is advised here, insofar as it is a strike happening at Clover. This is, of course, the dairy company in this country. And a security guard just comes under vicious and murderous attack by what is ordinarily people who you might be working next to, standing next to on the shop floor. There's something very frightening by the sick satisfaction you watch a group of people, a mob. If I can go back to that point I made about the Canadian police, for example, when everybody becomes, what's the word? Incognito, that's not the word I'm looking for. But when a mob mentality develops, how someone's life becomes super cheap, super easy to get rid of, Koketso, as you saw in that clip.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I can never be an anarchist. I don't condone anything that is even remotely similar to exactly what we just saw. At the end of the day, that's still someone's father, brother, etc., etc. But there's a lot to be said here in that, when you think of the policeman, you don't actually, and again, kudos to those who are the complete opposite of what I'm about to mention. But the reality is, most people in this country, when you see a policeman, you don't see a protector of your rights. You don't see a protector of your property. You don't actually see a protector of your life. That's not what you think of immediately when you see a uniformed policeman, when you come across them in the shop, for example. And the reason is because largely we don't feel protected. We don't feel like our lives are actually, held to high esteem by the South African police service. And if that's the case for the police service, imagine now private security. It's a growing industry and everything, but imagine now being a security guard who you are not empowered legally to even take the same level of action that the police does. You have someone who is effectively in that industry is risking their lives just by showing up at work over and above them being a normal citizen and risking their lives, period. Those crime stats are very shocking. I mean, 6,500 in 3 months, that's 90 days, That's 2,200 people, give or take, almost in a month, which then goes to the 74 per day that you mentioned. We don't see the same level of scorn from the media around these shocking stats like we do with other things, which are at least in comparison, they pale in comparison to this. Let there be one racist incident, and suddenly the country must come to a standstill. But random people, 70 plus of them, are losing their lives every day, and you don't see the same level of chest beating happening around this. And my primary gripe with the African National Congress really is cadre deployment. The reward for these shocking crime stats is for the minister responsible. He's being rewarded with basically keeping his job. You have to wonder, what does he actually do when he wakes up in the morning and then walks into his air-conditioned office over in that building in Pretoria that apparently also is one of the culprits that owes Eskom? What does he actually do? Do they actually work in the South African police service at an executive level at the very least to try and address these shocking statistics? I don't believe they do. Instead, people, it's incumbent on you to actually organize some form of protection, which is why we need to speak more about gun rights. And then B, on the other side of the coin, all this does is actually embolden those that would do crime to actually continue and graduate from petty theft into rape, then graduate from rape into murder. It empowers the criminals to actually be a little bit more ambitious in terms of committing crimes, and that's not being spoken enough about, unfortunately. We see one article from Business Tech, but you aren't going to see the same level of energy directed towards, at the very least, alleviating the situation as we do with quote unquote spicy cough and daily deaths and daily infections, etc.
I must, guys, maybe to wrap up, that's for Kanthan and Gabriel. Kanthan, I'm just mindful of your connection. But Kanthan and Gabriel, please, the final question really is this. We also talk a lot about blaming politicians and apportioning blame to them, rightly so, by the way, insofar as their failure to uphold the rule of law, the failure to enforce law enforcement, and of course the fundamental breakdown of life, liberty, and property rights. But there's something wrong in South African society, guys. There's something wrong in the manner in which we do things. Kanthan, a criminal in South Africa will enter the house, break in, and wait there for the owner to come. And when the owner comes, bring your keys, where's your gun, where's your money, and even leave you dead, in some cases even mutilating the victim. In other countries, a criminal will enter, not to actually be seen, steal something, and run away. That tells you something, Kanthan, about the nature of South African society. What do we read into this? How do we fix that in addition to bolstering the rule of law side of things?
Goes back to my point earlier. If we spent the past 1.5 hours talking about how to get women to arm themselves, if we spent the past 1.5 hours talking about how to actually ensure that we were taking out corrupt policemen, if we were talking about how to actually arm neighborhoods to protect ourselves, we would be getting there. Malema is the distraction, and exactly the reason why I say Dumo's point is absolutely correct. We need to be teaching women especially to be carrying firearms. to protect themselves, and we need to teach them that the correct thing to do in that scenario is to shoot to kill. And I say this without hesitation. If you are a woman who lacks the capacity to physically defend yourself against assailant, your first duty to yourself to protect your own life is to take out that assailant. And the best way we can empower you to do that is by giving you the tools that are necessary to do it. We had a scenario in my neighborhood back in Johannesburg where it was an opportunistic thing. There was a vehicle that went tearing past a woman that was just unlocking her gate to get into her driveway. They very quickly reversed back. A couple of guys piled out from there, stuck a gun to her head, stole her vehicle, and drove off. But here's what happened. Within 5 minutes, the entire neighborhood watch was alive. We had volunteers who immediately tracked down these guys, and within the space of half an hour, these guys have been tracked through to Alexandra. The vehicle was recovered, and it's precisely because of the fact that we have neighborhoods who say we are not going to take this lying down. We are going to take responsibility for our own safety. And the crucial thing is, whenever stuff goes down, guys, I can't say this strongly enough. Rather take out your assailants and then take your chances in court. And for the rest of us who actually have the ability to fund your defense, it is our civil duty to come forward and to fund your defense. And we do that through a range of organizations. But
okay, we lost that last point, Kenton, but I did get your overall gist here. Gabriel, please wrap it up for us. You know, everybody is on that same page to a very large extent. The individual has a role to play here. Protect yourself, make yourself dangerous, so to speak, to the criminal elites in this country. Arm up, bolster your security. I can go down the line. Place the family first in doing so. No? The second element, of course, is looking to how we can shape up, if you will, those institutions of society, the state being one, our communities being another, and the likes. But for me, I don't know what the IRR's position is on this. I want a practical in this regard. How do folks go about doing this? Your top 3 interventions, please. Gabriel, I think you're mute.
Sorry, I was double muted. I unmuted the microphone, but not the screen. Thank you, Sihle. I won't go through the. I think Aketa and Kenton have well covered the sort of basics of personal defense, and I think that is very important. I want to say it's important not to give up on South Africa. So we have seen the increase in violent public protests. We have seen the more recent increase in homicides, in Raubmord, meaning sort of home invasions that lead to murder. And it's that kind of comparison at which, it's astonishingly dangerous. We've seen the increase in attacks on people at business, which is with reference to, the armed heists of cash in transit, of attacks on businesses, insurrections, security guards being taken out. There are so many different ways on South African public transport when the train lines haven't been ripped up and you can still get on the train. There's a whole other nightmare of being on the train and being prey to people around you. So you've got to figure out how to watch your back and defend yourself in a tight corner. That is very important. But it is also important not to give up on this country. And by this country, I mean law and order. I mean the rule of law. I mean the police force, the criminal justice system. And part of the reason for that is that as much as you can do to defend yourself, especially we're all gentlemen here, it's another story if you're very elderly. It's another story if you're a child. It's another story if you're a young girl, a teenager, a 13-year-old, 5-year-old. There are reasons for governments. There are reasons for police forces. There are vulnerable people that it is very hard to reach with your own protective wing if you are doing it alone. And where a decent and civilized society uses government through the police force to protect the vulnerable, we have to do that. And I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, we have to do that by removing those who are in power and replacing them with those who at the very least on the face of it, promise to protect all South Africans. I can make a small reference back to that earlier case, and I take Canthan's point that we shouldn't make too much of a meal out of Julius Malema. Let's talk about Cyril Ramaphosa. One of the things that came up in Malema's trial now is his use of the word "our people." I won't get into how he explained it in trial, but I will say the following. It was extremely disturbing when Cyril Ramaphosa was just sworn in as president, and the next day he used "our people" as the president to only refer to one group.
Oh.
It should be no comfort to members of that group. It's not a comfort to black people or white people or Indian people or colored people. If a president is choosing one race to mean "our people," which Ramaphosa did, and he allowed Malema to answer Tera Lakota's question, who is our people, in Parliament, Malema stood up to say what the answer was, and it was not all South Africans, which it must be. Until we have a government which at least begins by saying "our people" is all South Africans, we don't really have a chance of proper accountability and respect for citizenship, for human rights enshrined in the rule of law, which protect all residents, which protect anyone who happens to be here, whether they're foreign or local. It's just a basic. At the very least, the government should pretend to respect the rules and the laws and the duties of care that they have to all of their citizens. It really is trite to say that a president is first duty is to defend the lives, to defend the security and the safety of the people of that country. But in South Africa, we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten to that first principle as a matter of agreement at a political level. The good news is we have gotten there as private citizens. We have gotten there in terms of some people putting their foot forward to defend themselves. We've gotten there, and the Institute of Race Relations research shows this very clearly, in the sense that 80% of South Africans want accountability and protection for all, collaboration amongst all, merit to be the basis of how we deal with things. Criminals go to jail. That's the basis on which you evaluate someone's character. We've got all that figured out for most people. We need to translate it into political action. And this is going to be a boring story, Sihle. If you ever ask me between now and 2024, what can you do at an institutional level to make your life better? I'm going to say the same thing, which is to think very carefully about your vote and to think about voting out the ANC-EFF alliance that has tried to corrupt the great promise and the great beauty of South Africa's constitutional democracy. That some people started out with good intentions, but have fallen on bad ways. That is my opinion.
Oh.
I do think that we have what it takes to do that. And I think in the meanwhile, Canthan, Martin, Kaketso, Dumo, Sihle, we are good gentlemen, and we must do what we can in the meanwhile within our spheres of influence to try and keep our families, our communities together and safe. And that's very excellent. But just know we need South Africa to also come together and push it in the right direction. And that's going to take the simple action of political action, which is a separate thing.
Absolutely, guys. I'm sorry we have run out of time. In fact, I took another 15 minutes and made it an extra 30 minutes, as we sometimes do. The show is at most 2 hours. It's the one long format show I have here on the BDL show. Please hit that like button. We had crazy numbers this evening, but the likes are nowhere near where I need them to be. Guys, hit that like button. It really does help. As always, final word from everybody. Just, how do the people reach you on your preferred platforms? Dumo.
Oh, apologies. Yes, I'm on Twitter at Dumo Denga. You can also follow the Man Patria page as well at manpatria_ZA, both on Twitter. Thanks for having me on, Sihle.
Hey, tada. Koketso Puti, how do the folks reach you? Pardon me.
Very similar to Dumo, that's at Koketso Resane on Twitter. Also catch me on Manpatra. Also catch me and Dumo and Nzuzo soon on the Chris Wyatt Africa show. We've got a separate show where we discuss African politics and current affairs, etc. with Colonel Chris Wyatt. So shout out there.
Excellento. Canthan, you mentioned a while ago you have a new blog, or not a new blog, pardon me, that you're looking to blog every day. How do the folks reach you?
The short answer is yes, I have been blogging every day since the 1st of January, kanthanpillay.com, every day. And I'm also Kanthan Pillay on just about every platform. I'm on Twitter, on the spaces.
Excellento. The line is a little choppy there. Apologies to the listeners, but you saw that information on the screen. We've lost Gabriel. So, Martin, how do the folks reach you?
Yeah, as always, my first port of call to find me is my website. That's martinvanstaden.com. I'm on Twitter. That's at Martin_ASFL. And I'm on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Martin van Staden Liberty. And that's one word. So thanks, Sigle. Remember, everyone, stay positive. Don't roll over in defeatism. There's always liberty is always within reach. Keep up the good work, everyone. Honor to be here again. Cheers.
Absolutely. That is Martin van Staden from the Free Market Foundation. A big thanks to all of my guests as I just zoop them off the stage there. And thank you, by the way, for watching the show, a marathon one and 2-hour-long show, but it's always worth it because you are a part of Liberty and Friends. Please, on your way out, hit that like button. As I said, we lost Gabriel, but you can find him at www.dailyfriend.co.za. He publishes news, analysis, and opinion daily on that platform. And thank you. You can find my content every Wednesday for the BDL show, every Sunday right here on Liberty and Friends. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the show, as I always say, please check out the descriptor. Most people are donating or contributing rather $50 to $100 a month, and it does awesome work in getting me out and about. With that being said, thanks for watching. And as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.